This is the Rising Stars Show with Rex Wallace.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to a special episode of Rising Stars. We are coming at you live from Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. We're part of Qualapalooza this week, which is by far the best named quality conference on the planet. I'm your host, Rex Wallace. We're going to be digging into customer retention today. And I'm going to jump in with introductions right here. So first, I want to bring on Mick Toomey down on the end here. So Mick is the co-host of the show and the CEO of Hyperlift, our sponsor. Welcome, Mick.
Thank you, sir.
And then let's introduce our two guests, and we will get rolling. So first off, here to my right, we have Archie Day, who is the Senior Director of Consumer Experience and Insights at Scan Health Plan. So please welcome Archie.
Well, thank you, Rex. Happy to be here and kind of share like all the great stuff Scan is doing in our markets and living up to our mission of keeping seniors healthy and independent.
Great, so good to have you, Archie. And then our next guest is the Customer Retention and Experience Director at Cigna. Please welcome Blake Amos.
Thank you.
So I'm going to let you guys actually take a second here before we jump into the topic and let you kind of explain to our audience, describe a little bit more about who you are in your role, the company that you have that role with, and in your mission. So Archie, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My role is leading consumer experience and insights, and what it really means is that when we think about our older adults and seniors, we think in terms of like their experience and everything which impacts their experience. And then we use basically a lot of like data and insights to really inform what that experience should look like. So my team kind of has like people with behavioral science and data science background and psychology background, really to kind of understand experience from a whole holistic point of view. And so that's what kind of my team does. And so where we kind of sit within the organization is really working very cross-functionally across all the different teams like sales and marketing to operations to like IT to like network, really working together to drive the consumer experience and insights.
Great. How about you, Blake?
Yep. And as Rex said, Blake Amos. Been with Cigna for 9 years now. Currently leading retention and customer experience for the Medicare Advantage business. Prior to that, I led our expansion efforts for the previous 4 years. So I like to say, created a bit of a tough job for myself in my new role because we know the inherent challenges that expansion brings on. But similar to Archie, leading the strategy around customer experience and retention, which means working very cross-functionally. The retention piece is under the growth organization within Cigna, which makes a lot of sense for where we're at as a company. So,
and let's actually dig into that as sort of our first big question. So, so making sure the right people are in the right seats on the bus, no matter what we're trying to accomplish, right, is critically important. So as we talk about retention and how it kind of ties to experience, which you guys have both touched on in just describing kind of your roles too, and its affiliation with CAHPS, right? So all of these things that are so important in Medicare Advantage plans right now. I see more and more plans using sort of the concept of reorganization, like reshuffling their teams to try to put them in the right spot, like the most optimal spot from a retention and experience standpoint. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not. Sometimes retention is formally owned, sometimes it's a byproduct of just the experience owner. But can each of you talk about, in your experience, kind of what does the structure? Not even necessarily what it looks like, I guess, at your organization, but what do you think it should look like? How could it be structured to be most effective? Blake, you want to start?
yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of it depends on where you're at as an organization. So I mean, as we continue to evolve, as we continue to expand and scale, what makes sense today might not make sense in a year. So I think when you think about reorganizations and kind of shuffling the decks or moving chairs, it's extremely important that it's thoughtful, because otherwise you can really just create a lot of swirl, and can be really a distraction. And if you think about customer experience, for sure, you can make the argument that it could sit, within quality, within growth on its own, within operations, because really everything touches customer experience, which indirectly is going to impact retention, as well. But as I was saying a minute ago, where we're at as a company today, it makes a lot of sense for retention to fit within the growth organization. I mean, at the end of the day, retention is half of the growth equation. And so I think it's really important to kind of be working hand in hand with the sales teams, with the market teams, on creating specific retention strategies with our different distribution channels. But then, also, it is a very cross-functional role. And, whether you're on the strategy, the execution, ultimately you're relying on a lot of different business areas to drive the execution. I think pretty much everyone knows really what needs to happen. And I think, what's going to differentiate companies is the ability to execute. So wherever it sits, I think it's just that it's got to be thoughtful about, where you can drive the most successful execution, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think, Blake, you made a really, really important point. Like, I think the right organization structure is where the execution is the best.
Yep.
Where you can easily, effectively make it. So, for example, at SCAN, like retention, just like experience, we always stress upon the fact that everybody owns experience, which is the truth, right? And retention and experience, like in my mind, they're very, very interconnected. Right? And so the way we kind of think about SCAN is everybody owns experience, everybody owns retention. So if you can do something specific to make the member happy and satisfied, do it. And then that's how we kind of empower through our training, through our culture, and through our discussions, is that retention and experience is everyone's job. And so the way we execute is, just like Blake said, very cross-functionally, that one team might be driving the effort, but it works in collaboration with all the bigger teams.
And you both made the point, and they were great answers, by the way. And I think to the fact that it depends on where you're at, right? I think that makes so much sense, and it relies on all of those cross-functional matrix partners, right? Who don't report into the experience team or the retention team. So Archie, you were saying, it's everyone's job, right? And like from a governance structure, how do you make that happen? How do you make people feel accountable? How do you engage those other departments? Do you have ideas on sort of what the best way to build that governance structure and execute is? Archie, you want to start?
Yeah, I think the way we do at SCAN is that we have a consumer experience governance committee, and that committee has basically our CIO, CMO, our COO, including our network general manager, and all the key leaders in that role. And the way we try to execute is through that steering committee, which basically happens is that we go and pitch the case and say, this is what needs to be done, or this is what we're thinking, and then we get their support from all the senior leaders using that steering committee. And once we get the support, which is in budget and resources, then it's more of an execution, and then we go and report back to the steering committee. And that has been very, very effective, because as I mentioned, it's so much everyone's job. Is we try to make sure every leader, especially every senior leader across the organization, is bought into the effort, and they have their buy-in with their, as well as their team's buy-in, to kind of execute that large-scale retention effort across the organization. So the way we kind of do it is we make sure all the leaders are in the same committee, and we openly talk about some of the challenges and the opportunities, and we execute through like that.
Yeah, and we have two primary forums. So we have a retention task force, which is a lot of the day-to-day business leads that are driving a lot of the efforts, and it's a very cross-functional group that we're really working through the issues of the week. And One of the we found it really helpful, one, to understand just everything that's going on, especially the things that are touching the customers. So whether it's marketing efforts, outbound call campaigns, vendor solutions, whatever it might be, creating awareness, is one of the goals of that. But then also, as issues come up, it's been a great forum to be able to discuss what is the best approach. If an issue's come up, how are we going to mitigate that? Is it, a marketing issue? Is it something we need to make customer service aware of? Is it an actual outbound campaign? So it's been beneficial having that forum. And then we do have the steering committee as well, because, ultimately having accountability for all of these things is absolutely crucial. So
what about, like many plans here, I'm
One other point I will make on the governance piece that I think we have to continue to evaluate, and a lot of plans are probably in a similar spot, is because there is a lot of overlap. So we do have retention-specific committees, but when you think about different STARS governance committees, experience, retention. It can be very easy to create a lot of duplicative meetings as well, and asking a lot of the same business leads to come and report out. So you've got to make sure that governance fits within, the overall strategy for the segment.
Yeah, I'm imagining with all the weight changes and the importance of, and just the challenges facing MA plans now that are, in some cases, pretty different than they were a few years ago, right? Like, I can imagine a lot of overlap between a retention steering committee, an experience steering committee, maybe a CAPS steering committee, a STARS steering committee that talks about CAPS and voluntary disenrollment. And I can imagine that just preventing the duplication and ensuring people's time is maximized, right? And topics are not duplicated would be, that's important.
Along those lines, you talked about the weights changing, and it changes the perspective, it changes the level of attention, right? When you think about clinical and pharmacy, right? You're getting monthly data that comes in, and you're getting that trending, and you understand how you're progressing throughout the year. At least with the customers that we deal with, probably due to the weight changes and some of that, the questions that they're getting from the leadership teams is changing. They're focusing a lot more, especially right now. So a lot of the final CAPS numbers are coming out, and they want to know, how are we tracking? How are we looking, throughout the year? I will say there's a lot of question out there about how do you keep a pulse on that? So do you guys do anything that, are there specific leading indicators, other metrics that you guys look at throughout the year to give you a sense of kind of where you're progressing on the CAP side?
Yeah, it's a hard question. It's a tough question because when I think about experience is not something what you do, it's a feeling, right? And so how do you kind of monitor feeling every day, every month, and so that you can do something about it? And so, like compared to like pharmacy, like to the claims, like you're pretty much like looking at the data, like this black and white. Experience is gray, and just kind of navigating the gray. And so it's a hard question, like how do you kind of keep track of it? We do certain different things at SCAN. Like we have something called a group level survey, which is like a mini CAP survey, which kind of measures the experience across like 3 or 4 times a year, in addition to like, the voice of the customer program, where we use like from ethnographic research to like actual quantitative data to inform how that experience is looking. But it's such a tough question, and it is true that from the leadership, one of the key questions which comes in is like, okay, how do I measure day to day versus like a longer period of time?
Yeah, and you mentioned the voice of customer program. I think that's key. Because we have so much information on our customers, whether it's pharmacy information, call interaction data, survey data, all of those things. But if you don't have a way to look across all of that data, both observed, solicited, then you're missing the boat. So it's being able to look across all the different data sources that are coming in to actually be able to pull out meaningful insights to know what those customers are feeling, what their experience currently is. And really, that's how you have to manage it that way, in my opinion.
That makes sense.
I think an important point, just what Blake said, and to your question, Mick, it's like it's very hard to talk about retention and experience without talking about like net promoter score, right? And so even if you'd like to do a net promoter score, the good thing is that most people are happy. Now, if you think of like the small percentage of people who are unhappy, they're not unhappy at the same level. And so that's kind of like really the segmentation kind of sits in, which is like not everybody is unhappy, and whoever is unhappy, they're not at the same level of unhappiness, and not because of the same reasons. And so this whole kind of the voice of the customer and the net promoter score, the advocacy is like how unhappy you are to basically not advocate for the brand or leave the plan. And that's where the magic sauce is finding that tipping point, which is where the data really helps you kind of figure out, this is how I make the decision. Because there is no way there's enough resources to reach out to everyone. It's just not practically feasible, and it's not even practically like costly feasible, right? And so that's where like the data piece really comes together with the voice of the customer, is finding that sliver of people who are unhappy enough to not recommend the brand or more likely to leave the plan.
So on that note, so when we talk about happy or satisfied members, where I guess where's the balance between focusing on who we think are unsatisfied members, and who we think are satisfied members but maybe not loyal, and I guess the difference between being satisfied and being loyal, because happy members, happy customers still leave because, let's say, they're happy, but our a competitor comes in with a rich benefit, and we lose them. So retention is still impacted, but they weren't dissatisfied. Do you guys have thoughts on that? Kind of how do we balance that, and how do we make sure we're focusing on loyalty too, in addition to satisfaction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Rex. And one of the things that we saw from some of the disenrollment studies that we've done is that the vast majority of customers that leave us are satisfied with the plan, indicating that loyalty is not always driven, as you said, by satisfaction. So I think it's a balance. I mean, at the end of the day, we know, network, cost, benefits, are the primary reasons why someone's going to join and why somebody's going to leave your plan. So you have to focus on those areas, but it's all the things in between that can also drive that. So obviously, if someone calls into customer service, they have a very poor experience, your likelihood of keeping that customer is probably pretty low. But if you go above and beyond to create a really positive experience for those customers, you do have a chance to create that loyalty. So I think it is focusing on the moments that matter throughout that customer journey and making sure that you're really creating positive experiences for the customer and making it easy for the customer.
Yeah, great point, Blake. Like the moments that matter, right? Like that is really the key of like the experience. So we do kind of two things specifically. One, we really focus on customer delight. Like delight is such an important factor, which is like just go above and beyond in every interaction. So that's one thing which we focus on, which is just the next level up. The second thing which we focus on is really the human experience, like the human way of experience, which is if you mess up, then accept it, acknowledge it, and say, hey, I'm sorry, let me fix it. And you fix it the next time. And that's one of the key things which we have been really focusing on, which is like acknowledge the challenges we face and read out to those challenges. For example, like during COVID, I'm pretty sure we had all like staffing shortages and resources and long wait times. And our CEO, Dr. Sachin Jain, we worked out a communication from him, which basically says, hey, just like everybody, we are facing staffing shortages. It might lead to wait time, and thank you for understanding. And please call us or communicate with us so that we can reach out to you. And that's important, because if you're not acknowledging the member pain points, that's the human emotion way of like, hey, acknowledge that this is something going on and now do something to fix it. And that's one of the big areas of how we think about experience and loyalty and satisfaction is really that, hey, if I have a friend who says like, hey, you know what, I messed up, but I'm gonna fix it right, that's buying loyalty. That's like, hey, I'm gonna hang out with this guy. So that's how we kind of think about loyalty and like customer delight and really thinking about acknowledgement.
I love that. You're not just communicating with the members, but you're doing it so proactively, right? Like you're not waiting. It's not even a recovery perspective, right? It's preparing them, managing their expectations. Hey, we're having some staffing challenges, just like every other healthcare organization. Please be patient. We're going to serve you as quickly as we can, right? So I like that a lot.
And members appreciate it, right? Because they're seeing it in the market.
Yeah.
Like they understand how healthcare industry fits in comparison to like Amazons of the world. They understand like the dynamic of the healthcare industry, and so part of it is just setting expectations, navigating through those expectations, and just delivering on them.
And Blake, you touched on making it easy for them, or something at the end of what you said, but it made me think about the importance of the effortless experience, right? Like making it making it to where they don't have to jump through 10 hoops to get something resolved, to get something done, so that operational customer service, whole focus right around can they chat, like all of that is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's critical. And then, I mean, even thinking about the effortless experience, I mean, one of the findings in the DEFT research here recently, was around, customers having to reach out, like their onboarding experience and the likelihood of those customers to leave, and the correlation there with whether or not they were the ones to reach out to the health plan versus the health plan proactively reaching out to the customers. So it's things like that, making sure that the health plan's being proactive, engaging the customer, making it as easy as possible. So
it's that was one of those kind of elementary, I guess, right, insights, but so found kind of surprisingly, surprisingly insightful, because it feels so elementary, but when you really think about it, who makes the initiates the contact, right? Who makes the effort to, does the plan make an effort to reach out to me as a new customer, or do I have to reach out to them, right? And I know even welcome calls, many plans just try to complete it in the 60 or 90 days after the effective date, but I imagine that's even
you missed the boat
speeding
there.
that up, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a customer that enrolls with you in October, and the amount that they're being bombarded with marketing materials, commercials, calls, I mean, that can be I can't even imagine how confusing and overwhelming that process is. But if they sign up with you in October, and even if you do the welcome calls within 30 days of the effective date, you're looking at late January. That's a significant time period for those customers to change their mind, or to forget what benefits they have access to, how to utilize them, and once that effective date goes and they start trying to utilize, if they don't understand where to go for what, they're going to leave you. I mean, it's really a 6-month open enrollment that we're experiencing now with OEP. So it's critical that onboarding process is smooth, that you re-educate on their benefits, make sure that they really understand what they signed up for, how to utilize, where to access information, and get them activated with the plan as quickly as possible so that they can start utilizing their benefits and taking advantage of it.
Yeah, Blake, you're right on the money. It's like it's 6 months of like people onboarding. Like it's really big. So we call it the radio silence period. And so the irony, I always find it, is like before enrollment, you're getting pretty much like information from everybody, right? The brokers, the TV, everywhere you look, there's a Medicare ad, right? And once you enroll, then there's silence. Nothing happens until 1/1, right? And so I call it the radio silence period, because I feel that's the moment of impact. Because just like you onboarded a new plan, you want something to know, okay, what's going to happen? And so one of the key things, the way we think about experience, is in kind of 3 ways. ease, effectiveness, and emotion. And the thought process is you make it super easy and make it emotionally strong. Because a good experience is a great emotional experience and an easy experience in addition to the effective. So the way we kind of think about a radio silence period and addressing that is like, how do we make sure that the member feels that this is where they are, this is what's going to happen next, and this is how the plan is reaching out to me to make sure everything is taken care of. And so we really, really hone in that radio silence period and even obviously the Q1 to make sure we are able to reach out to the members in a very segmented way, so that we can communicate, again, the ease, effectiveness, and the emotion story.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can really get members to feel like they're activated with their plan and that they're, utilizing benefits. I mean, whether that's getting them engaged digitally, getting them set up for utilizing the benefits as of 1/1, or helping them get appointments set up, prior to the effective date. There's a lot of opportunity there for customers to feel that they're utilizing the benefits, which makes them significantly less likely to leave the plan during that time period.
How early are you comfortable doing that? So if a new member signs up AEP October 15th, right? As soon as they're fully prepared, they've done all their research, they know, hey, I want to be a member of this plan. And then like the radio silence, you're talking, November 15th, December 15th, almost 3 months, right? Just until the effective date. Right. How early after October 15th, let's just call that day zero, right? Like how early are you comfortable making outreach to them and starting that activation process, right?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the activation can start at the time of enrollment. I mean, the value-based enrollment gives you the opportunity. I mean, if you're able to get a health risk assessment right after that enrollment process, if you're doing a good job, you're getting a lot of good information about those customers that should really help inform what those customer journeys should look like, because all those customer journeys shouldn't look the exact same. So if you're getting that information about the customer, not only are you getting them engaged with the plan, but it's also informing the plan on what that customer journey should look like. So, I mean, I really think right after that enrollment process is when you really want to start engaging those customers, and hopefully, you're communicating them in a way that they prefer, whether that's text message, calls, digitally, making sure you understand those communication preferences and shaping it up from there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think you should start as early. Again, like, we think of experience as relationships. And what I mean by that is when you get a new friend, what you don't do is like have one contact and then don't talk to him for 3 months. He ain't gonna be your friend anymore, right? And so that's exactly just how human relationships work. Once you make a friend, you call them back the next day. Hey, how's it going? How was the day? And that is exactly the way we want to kind of think about it, is that they are jumping into a relationship with your brand. And once they jump into the relationship, it's both of like the plan's job to kind of manage and maintain that relationship, because there's a lot of other people ready to take that business away. And so you have to be building that relationship through your onboarding program just to make sure, kind of the point Blake made, like the HRAs, making sure the doctors, the benefits, and it's during the holidays, right? Who wants to talk about healthcare during Thanksgiving? Everybody wants to talk about turkey. So one of the things which we think about,
football.
right, is between like Thanksgiving and the New Year, there is this time period where people are traveling. So a lot of the things which are top of mind is, okay, I'm traveling, healthcare, how do I make sure that when I'm traveling, everything is good? And so if you don't reach out, they are gonna be reach out. Like for example, we have benefits around Fitbit and Purse and all that. We get so many calls just to make sure it's set up. And that's really the key, is like understanding human behavior, understanding that it's a relationship, understanding what's the context in their life, which is vacation, people might be traveling, there's a lot going on. How do you keep it succinct? That's how we kind of think about like onboarding, especially during the radio silence period.
Yeah, so such great perspectives. Are there any organizational barriers that you guys are facing from regarding that early kind of activation? I imagine some plans in the past, maybe it's completely different now, right? Because there's more awareness now, and there's more, and we're much more aware of the fact that there are basically no switching barriers now, right? I mean, the average member has access to 39 plans in their zip code, and you know, it takes zero effort to switch plans today, right? And you have a lot of choices. So, so I can imagine in the past, like during AEP, some plans saying, we don't want to reach out too soon because they can still switch again. It may be a wasted effort, right? Because they can still enroll up to December 7th, and it's the last choice they make. They can actually enroll in 7 different plans, right? In that period, it's the last one standing, whoever they're enrolled with last. So, is there any organizational barrier there? Anyone saying, "Hey, maybe don't reach out too early," or is it, yeah, let's get them activated on day 0?
Yeah, I mean, I think organizationally, people are bought in and understand the importance. And I mean, it is so competitive now that if you're like, you might be engaging a customer that might leave you, but if you're not engaging them at all, you're going to have a lot more leaving you. So I think people understand the importance of that, and there's buy-in there.
Yeah, I think I think that's the great question, right? And I think connects to a mixed question, which is like, there's huge focus from senior leadership. Like, part of me is like, hey, the CAP scores around MSATs going to level 4 is a disguise in blessing. Like, it is, right? It's a blessing in disguise. And I think that has really helped the senior leadership, kind of going back to Blake's point, is that, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, so you do it, right? And so that's exactly the thought process, is that if you are not engaging the member from the very beginning, you have much more chances of losing that member. And this is where the data piece helps, because there's no way you can reach out everybody at the same time. And that's where, like, the data maturity really helps in segmenting those members and really knowing who needs the first outreach versus who needs the second reach. Just like you guys, I'm pretty sure you have your friends. Some friends need more talking, a phone call. Some friends needs just a text, and some friends like, hey, how's it going after 3 months? And that's exactly how humans behave, and that's how we think about how we're using data maturity to kind of really segment that population so that you can do it in a much more feasible and effective way.
So let's as this relates to growth and expansion in new markets. So many people here in the audience and listening, and I'm sure you too, right? Are like, we all want to grow, we all want to expand, and as we do that, as we move into new markets, let's just take that as the example, right? Let's assume we're moving into a new state or a brand new market where the members don't know our name, maybe, right? The doctors, the providers don't really know us. They're not engaged with us. We're setting up contracts with them, but we're building data sharing, methodologies and processes. We don't have local field agents in that market, so we're maybe either using brand new brokers, brand new field marketing organizations, maybe brand new national call center brokers, e-brokers, et cetera. Like, those are all big headwinds, right, when it comes to retention. We're not sticky there yet. There's nothing sticky about that new market yet. There's no scale with the providers to really engage the providers yet deeply, right? There are creative ways to do that, but not based on, we don't have, we're growing, we're small. How do you guys, as in our strategy, as we look at a new market, what are your thoughts on kind of how do you manage it? How do you prevent that?
I mean, I think ultimately, it's the same. You have to create a very positive experience for the customers from that onboarding process. That first year is so critical. And you mentioned a lot of the inherent challenges that expansion and growth bring. Whether it is, the doctors are not as familiar or engaged with your plan. You don't have the significant membership with those providers, or the brand reputation. And we know too that the year 1, year 2 duration customers are the most at risk of leaving you. It just creates even more pressure and focus that you have to put on making sure that you have that positive year one experience onboarding process.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. As kind of Blake is saying, like reaching out, creating that ecosystem. So we do a lot of different things, but one of the things which has really worked for us, especially when we expanded in the Arizona and the Nevada market, is we fax the PCPs. We fax the PCPs of who we are and the SCAN members, and that actually was a lot more effective compared to a lot of the other strategies which we used around provider communication, member communication, and that worked like a champ. So again, but the point being, it's so hard, and so part of like the onboarding efforts and everything is like the effort is just not the same. It's not like, hey, you have half of the membership or 1/3, and so your effort is 1/3. The effort is actually double, maintaining that onboarding, especially in the new markets. And I totally agree with Blake. The people within the first 3 years are most likely to leave, and so you have to kind of amplify your efforts within the first 3 years. It's kind of like, again, like the relationship, right? If they become the friend for like the first year, they're more likely to be your friend unless you really, really mess it up. But it's a very hard point to solve.
And it just emphasizes the need to have really successful, thoughtful expansion and not plant the flag type of expansion. I mean, you have to go in with a good network, with a good product, and really invest in that market, understand what those local market dynamics are, and really try to understand your customers in those markets.
So that's a really good point, because as we have expanded into the new markets, and as you guys know, SCAN is growing to other markets too. One of the big things is what Blake just mentioned is, as we look at expansion, every team in the organization is involved with that expansion effort to make sure it's meaningful and thoughtful. It's kind of like, make sure once you get them, we can service as good, if not better, than what we currently service our members. And with that customer delight perspective, everybody just buys into that mission of the organization and how we think about service, and really take it to the next level as we expand markets. So having everybody's seat on the table when we think about expansion is so critical to the success of that expansion market.
So in making sure the voice of the member in that market, the voice of the customer, is represented in those expansion strategy meetings, short of having like you guys or people like you and your roles in that in those meetings, any other secrets there on ensuring the voice of the customer is represented in those meetings? Or is it just making sure your teams are there?
Well, I'd love to say if just our teams are there, that's the secret sauce, but it's not. I think you kind of mentioned about like the brokers, right? And the agencies, the broker agencies, they really understand the market really well. And so when we think about expansion strategies, we really bring in the brokers in, and we really talk about that voice of the member perspective from them, like, hey, what will stick, what will not stick, what's key? And it typically does come to like the network, the cost, the benefits, and all that stuff. But understanding that nuances is so important. But we typically, one of our secret sauces is, again, I don't know if it's secret or not, but we work with the brokers really, really closely to understand like what's happening in the market, what's meaningful.
Yeah, and I would say, fortunately with Cigna being a national company, as we've expanded, I mean, you have some of that just based on our commercial and other lines of business that, we do have that local market understanding. But it is a different customer with Medicare Advantage. So I completely agree, working with the brokers, with the providers, to really understand those customers better even before you enter those markets is critically important.
Fantastic. So we're going to get ready to pivot to some Q&A from our live audience, but we're going to end the recording here. So I want to thank Blake Amos from Cigna, thank Archie Day from SCAN. Great insights. So thanks for being part of the panel today. Mick, thanks for co-hosting, for the sponsorship. So we will turn it over. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.